I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this question about what is gender pay equity. It's actually not that complicated. There's about 4 factors to define gender pay equity within organisations. We all know them, really. But I do note that this issue about what is gender pay equity is often used as a distractor by people who are interested in making it more complicated and complex in order to ensure that no one has to be accountable for whether or not they're doing it. And I like to simplify it, and I've defined it in those ways, which I don't think is complex or difficult to understand. It doesn't involve definitions about, where are we talking about averaging over total hours or average weekly hours or what part-time weeks. Those sorts of distractions always, to my mind, are things that allow people to continue a discussion but never actually take responsibility for any outcome from that discussion. So, simple definition, I think, is the best. Why don't we have gender pay equity? Well, I mean, it's people write a thesis on this, but it's not that difficult to understand. Historically, we directly discriminated against women in work. We did it. You had instruments that actually had rates of pay for men and rates of pay for women that were different. So there was the direct discrimination element. I work with women who talk to me all the time about that, and who talk to me about the requirement that they had to resign on when they were married from their employment, and who are still in the workforce now, so it's not that long ago. I talk to women who tell me that they were not allowed to have superannuation as a woman when superannuation first came in. It was that direct, and that's in current working women's lives times. Women's work, so there's direct discrimination. Historically, there was also women's work being less valued. The work that women predominantly did was less valued by society, and obviously also women's role in society was marginalised. Why don't we have it? What are the factors now? Clearly, the undervaluation of skills in industries and areas where women predominate is a problem, and that's all of what the Terra Nova and Christine Bartlett case is all about. The valuing of care work and the undervaluation of that very important function. Women's lack of access to work-based training and qualifications is another issue. Different levels of eligibility for discretionary payments, bonuses and performance pay, including things like starting salaries, is a key factor. I know it's a key factor in your agencies and organisations. I know that in a system like you have in New Zealand, where there is more discretion around payments and where transparency of payment systems is not as clear, those sorts of inequalities actually do grow. People who I have seen people who've been in an environment where they believe equal pay on that very clear, just that clear factor of, do I get the same job, that same salary as a male doing the same work, have been shocked in discretionary pay systems to find out the differentials that do apply. So there's this kind of thing that happens where people think they're getting paid the same, and when they find out, they're not. A major factor is the inflexible organisational structures that restrict employment prospects of workers with family responsibilities. It's a kind of it's one of those wondrous moments, I think, that we have where we still say, why is it that we have not come to terms with the fact that people work and they have families? What is it about our lives and our thinking that we haven't dealt with this question? It's that blindingly obvious issue. What is it about our societies that we haven't? What does it say about how we value family that we haven't come to terms with this issue in a more direct way? I've said to a number of local government executive officers that I've dealt with over years, who've told me about the problems that they've got with dealing with flexible work requests, flexible return to work requests from people returning from maternity leave, what is the surprise? You have a cohort of women who you employ between the age of 25 and 40. It's relatively logical for you to understand that a number of those people will choose to have children, so they'll have maternity leave. It's relatively obvious for you to be able to predict that in our society they will be the principal caregiver because we haven't managed to deal with that. It's relatively obvious for you to predict that a large number of them are going to want to come back to work. Where is the surprise? And why aren't you planning for this? And they are almost shocked when they're met with those requests that say the person's not coming back full time. They want to come back part-time, and it's like this is the first time it's ever, every time it happens, it's like it's the first time it's ever been considered in the history of the world, and that concerns me. For women coming back into, what I'm even more concerned about more recently is the number of instances that I've come across for women who have come back, who are seeking to come back as managers, who've held managerial roles, quite senior women who've held managerial roles, and who are coming back from maternity leave or extended parental leave, and who are told that they cannot perform their managerial role on a part-time basis. So they would have to take a demotion if they wanted to come back on part-time. And I'm astounded that, again, in the 21st century, that we're having that conversation. So why don't we have gender pay equity? Well, in fact, my overall view about it is because leaders are not making it a priority. In the end, it all boils down to that. And that was kind of my blunt message for all those CEs who haven't attended, but for those CEs who have attended, thank you, and here's the delivery of the blunt message. And so I want to unpack why I think, from my experience, what's going on. I call this the inequity equation. What I think leaders are not doing is working their way through this as an equation. I think some leaders are still at point one. That they're still not convinced that inequity exists. In the face of research, information, evidence, they're still not able to sign up to an understanding that inequity exists. Certainly, that's more generally. Certainly, even if they are prepared to accept that it exists, it's out there, not in here. So that it doesn't exist in my organisation or my agency. And I don't need to look at whether it exists or not, because if I look at whether it exists or not, I might find out something different. So I make bold statements that it exists. I make statements about my organisation's commitment to equal opportunity and valuing everyone in the workforce equally. But do I do anything to have a closer look at that? Not really, but because I don't need to, because inequity doesn't exist in my organisation. Again, in the face of evidence that would tell you, from everything that we know, that your agency, for example, would be a very unique organisation if it didn't exist in your agency, because all the research tells you it's happening everywhere. They've moved their way through 1 and 2. Sometimes we have this issue about whether or not it's an acceptance that inequity is a problem. I'd like to say we should be at the point where we can all say we understand that treating people inequitably is a problem, but I'm not so sure when I hear the discussions that are going on. I mean, they're not normally that blunt. People don't normally say things like, no, we'd like to discriminate here. We find that useful. It's not normally that blunt. But it can be things like, what you've got to understand, like Lisa, as the business priority of my organisation, mean that I've got to deal with that question of the talent that's needed for my organisation, and dealing. You know, so that's the kind of conversation. So even if you've got some sort of recognition that it might be a problem, it might be existing. It's not necessarily a recognition that it is actually a problem. We don't find that's a problem here. We think that everyone's satisfied. Okay, so if we get through that it exists in this organisation, we understand it's a problem, we should be doing something about it. And even if we get through 1, 2 and 3, we sometimes halt at 4. We'd like to do something about it, but you've got to understand there are many competing priorities. We will be looking into that over time. However, resources are an issue. We're a funded organisation or agency, and if only we could change the funding model, then we might be able to do something about that. So I'm still not convinced that even people who understand that inequity exists and that it's a problem understand the need to are committed to doing something about it. And that leads me to the 5th point of the equation then, and that is that it requires the leaders to be the ones who actually say, this is a problem, it exists in my organisation, it is a problem, we need to do something about it, and this is what we're going to do. Why is it a problem? The most common one is this argument that it's complicated. So I think people have overcomplicated the problem, which is not to say it's not something that doesn't need sort of real attention, and that I'm not suggesting it's an easy thing to fix. I'm just saying that I think that the element of it being complicated has been used as an excuse to not make it a priority. We don't have to, so no one's had to do anything about it, but now there's that question of, will we have to? If this act actually applies, will we actually have to do something about it? And I mean, for me, that's the tragedy. As a lawyer, we love when the law steps in to intervene in injustice in the way that this sort of thing happens. But really, do we really have to rely on the law doing it that way? We have to rely on these women who are out there doing that hard slog on $14 an hour. Do we actually have to rely on them? And this dragged out case that's been going on forever and a day and will continue to drag out, is that the real reason why we're suddenly interested in this issue? Do we really have to rely on those sorts of things before we'll actually tackle that issue? That's a concern to me. I think there's a capacity issue for a lot of organisations. They don't have the resources. They think they don't have the resources to fix it. And that's one of the reasons why they don't want to open up the discussion, because they're not sure what it might look like. It's really real. And the only thing I can say to that is I think if you actually take yourself through that inequity matrix or equation and you actually have a genuine conversation, at least getting to that point where you say, we know it's an issue and we want to do something about it, but we need to talk about the how. The goodwill that comes with that will help you with that question about how you do it and how you do it over time and at what cost and what resources can you put towards it. Other things are a bigger priority. Usually those things involve fiscal things, new cars for CEs or things like that. Really, I mean, hello, a human right is being breached, but we've got this kind of other priorities that are going on over here, and we're still making this a very low thing on the priority list. And the final one, which I think actually is the one that encompasses everyone, is that we actually have to tackle too many demons if we were going to open this up. Now, I've got a really good example of this at the moment with an organisation who has a key workforce problem. In their key workforce, which is the whole focus of this business, they have 18% women doing a highly skilled technical job. And they have identified themselves without any pressure from an outside that, and there's a worldwide shortage of these people to do this job, worldwide shortage. So they have actually identified as an organisation that their key issue for their future labour supply is to get more women into the role. They're at 18% now. They set themselves the huge target of getting to 24% by 2019. we're talking about like incremental progress here, obviously, not revolutionary. They also identified that they've got a key problem retaining the women that they do have. What was the key issue that's come out about attraction and retention? The key issue about attraction and retention is it's a shift work environment and they don't allow for part-time work in an easy way. The culture is a blokey culture. The blokes are worried about part-time work undermining their standards. Right? What has this organisation done? This organisation now has its key strategy to move it from 18 to 24%, holding morning teas once a year in order to celebrate the women who have achieved into the role. Okay, so that's a classic example of there are too many demons for that organisation. So it identified as a key business priority the need to increase labour supply and to do that through women. And yet it would not tackle the demon with the union, with the employees, highly unionised area by the way, with the employees, with itself, with its managers to say you couldn't roster in a way that would accommodate part-time work easily. It would not tackle that. It would move to that strategy of morning teas once a year. In Australia, I don't know whether this is a kind of a broad management thing that's happening, but this concept of the kind of shadow of the leader is a phenomenon that's getting more airplay. The idea that as the leader, your shadow is cast across the organisation in a variety of ways, in what you do, what you say, what you prioritise and what you measure. So when you do things that promote gender pay equity, that's important. When you say things that are aligned with that, when you actually make priorities are associated with that in significant ways, when you say you're going to start measuring this issue, that has a major impact within your organisation. It's the most influential thing within your organisation. The CEO's job position here is the most influential. You can have all the programs, your policies, everything you want, but if that is not the shadow that you're casting as the CE, then it's a problem. It will not happen. It will not shift the culture. And so I think it's worthwhile examining that and looking at that you really hold the key. The title to the speech that I was giving today was that gender pay equity is your, I put puzzle because I had problem there. It's your problem to solve. But I think it's your puzzle to solve. But what I'm really saying it's you that will make the difference here. And we'd like you to walk away from this forum understanding that, and understanding that choosing to say nothing and choosing to do nothing is a very big statement on this issue. It's really a walk away from the issue. So it's no longer, in my view, an option for you to not have an opinion on this and not do something about it. By not doing something about it now, when this is actually being highlighted as a key issue, you are actually making the choice to say you are not going to address inequity in your workplace, in your organisation. And you need to understand that when you send that signal to your employees, then it has a particular impact, a large impact. What does leadership look like? Well, it looks something like this, and I never thought that I would be citing an Australian Army leader on this question. I don't know if you have the same problem here, but we've got to check it past with our armed forces in Australia and in terms of how they've treated women and the like. And we've had numerous reports about it, and we've had leadership after leadership in the armed forces denying or then obfuscating or what have you like that, and we suddenly have someone who stood up. And it's really had a huge impact. So Lieutenant General David Morrison came to the issue having tried to deal with some of the issues around women in the Army and the treatment of women in the Army in Australia in a series of scandals that occurred. But the last scandal that he dealt with was in 2000. Well, the catalyst for his work now was something that happened in 2013, where a group of soldiers, including senior officers, were involved in a group called the Jedi Council. really. A group of people who set themselves up to share and distribute explicit and derogatory portrayals of women, and sometimes violent portrayals of women, images of women, including images of women who've been recorded having sex without their knowledge. He ended up putting in place a whole strategy, but he also ended up making a statement to his employees, which you're about to hear. And the statement was recorded the day after he went to brief his senior command on what had happened, what he'd discovered in terms of this Jedi Council, and what he intended to do about it. And you can imagine that wasn't necessarily in the army, an environment where he was getting 100% rebuke, mate, or go on, we're all behind you.
Earlier today, I addressed the media, and through them the Australian public, about ongoing investigations into a group of officers and NCOs whose conduct, if proven, has not only brought the Australian Army into disrepute, but has let down every one of you and all of those whose past service has won the respect of our nation. There are limits to how much I can tell you because the investigations into this network by both the New South Wales Police and the ADF Investigative Service are ongoing. But evidence collected to date has identified a group of men within our ranks who have allegedly produced highly inappropriate material, demeaning women, and distributed it across the internet and Defence's email networks. If this is true, then the actions of these members are in direct contravention to every value the Australian Army stands for. By now, I assume you know my attitude to this type of conduct. I have stated categorically many times that the Army has to be an inclusive organisation in which every soldier, man and woman, is able to reach their full potential and is encouraged to do so. Those who think that it is okay to behave in a way that demeans or exploits their colleagues have no place in this Army. Our service has been engaged in continuous operations since 1999 and in its longest war ever in Afghanistan. On all operations, female soldiers and officers have proven themselves worthy of the best traditions of the Australian Army. They are vital to us maintaining our capability now and into the future. If that does not suit you, then get out. You may find another employer where your attitude and behaviour is acceptable, but I doubt it. The same goes for those who think that toughness is built on humiliating others. Every one of us is responsible for the culture and reputation of our Army and the environment in which we work. If you become aware of any individual degrading another, then show moral courage and take a stand against it. No one has ever explained to me how the exploitation or degradation of others enhances capability or honours the traditions of the Australian Army. I will be ruthless in ridding the Army of people who cannot live up to its values, and I need every one of you to support me in achieving this. The standard you walk past is the standard you accept. That goes for all of us, but especially those who by their rank have a leadership role. If we are a great national institution, if we care about the legacy left to us by those who have served before us, if we care about the legacy we leave to those who, in turn, will protect and secure Australia, then it is up to us to make a difference. If you're not up to it, find something else to do with your life. There is no place for you amongst this band of brothers and sisters.
Feel the white heat of his anger in that. We've never had women talked about as soldiers in that way, as equal soldiers in Australia before, and we've never had someone tell them to get out. They don't like the way it's going, including the senior leaders. But of course, it's easy. I mean, to me, that's what leadership looks like on these types of issues. And of course, that's got to be backed by action. So what's happened since that time, as a result of his inquiries and further investigation, 200 people have been discharged from the Army over these related issues. So 200 people who he says can't live up to Army values are gone as a result of the work that he's been doing. There's a bit of pain because as a result of that, more women soldiers have come forward to tell his story, and he tells you how devastated he is by the stories. How devastated he is, but how activated he is as well as a result of hearing these stories. But interestingly enough, there's been a substantial spike in the number of female recruits into the army since this went viral. So in terms of that business outcome, for them, clearly that sort of demonstration of leadership in that really symbolic way has had a major gain for them. But I do think that there is a moral, there are certainly legal arguments, there is business arguments, but there actually is a moral imperative for you to take a decision about how you're going to handle this issue of the gender pay equity within your agencies, and doing nothing, in my view, is no longer an option.